welcome you to this webinar series again. And today we have Karidewa Nyeinga from Makerere University. Karidewa actually took his master thesis with NTNU in physics. He completed his PhD at Makerere, has been continuing working on energy storage, small-scale energy storage for food preparation. So Karidewa, I'll give the word to you. Xiao Xiao is doing the slides, so you just give her a note when you switch.
Okay, thank you so much, OJ, and the coordinator for this webinar series. As OJ has already done the introduction, I'll go to my presentation today. Our talk will be based on energy challenges in refugee camps in Uganda. We have quite a number of refugees in the country. I'll be showing the numbers, but there is a basic challenge which is to do with energy for cooking. And that's what we're going to discuss. We will not talk about any lighting. Our main focus is energy for cooking. Now you see on our screen, you have the Makerere, but also you see logo of the EU, because we have from the European Commission Erasmus project, which I will show you more about it because of the discussion. The next slide. Yes, so our discussion, this is mainly the main of this afternoon. I'll show you the refugee settlements in Uganda. They are in different locations and they're from different countries. So we'll also see them from the various countries. And then into the cooking technologies in the refugee camps. And we'll look at the household levels and also a few points on at levels. Basically, we'll look at schools. And then we'll go more into the challenges that are faced, because the main source of energy for cooking here is firewood. So we'll discuss a few of the challenges that the refugees face, but these challenges also cut across to the citizens of the country. So I will also highlight a few impacts and then propose a way forward. Some of these proposals are from the humanitarian organizations with activities in refugee camps. And then we also highlight what we as university are doing in the aspects of energy for cooking. And then of course, we'll acknowledge the people who have been supporting us over the years. Next slide. Yes, now here you see the refugee settlements in Uganda. Now there's a small map on your right up there, which is in the form of a circle. It's gray, and then red there is where the Uganda is located. Now, when you look at this map carefully, to the north, I want to see the north. To the north is South Sudan. Let me see upward. Is South Sudan. Then to the left of the map is the Democratic Republic of Congo. Down is Tanzania, where Professor Kimambo is right now. And then to the east, you have Kenya. And then, of course, southwest, there is Rwanda and Burundi. Now, the colors which are, maybe let's call brown or pink, those colors indicate the current locations where refugees are settled. Now, in the northeast and northern part of the country, that's where the majority of the refugees are. And these ones come from South Sudan. And then towards the west, you have many refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo, that is DRC. And then down south, you have refugees from mainly Burundi. And then if you come, you see a tiny spot close to Lake Victoria. That is where Kampala is. Here we have what we call urban refugees. Let's talk more about it in the next slide. Yes, here we try to show you the numbers. These numbers are from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. Actually, it's a bit recent report. I picked it from them. I wanted to show you the exact figures. Now you can see the blue, which occupies, I think, more than 65% of that chart. These are refugees from Southern. There has been fighting in South Sudan last year, so the majority of the refugees have settled in Uganda. So they occupy this number. Actually, I think the ground people talk about 1 million, but here you see 911,000. The next highest number are refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo, 400,000. And these ones, as I showed you in previous map, they're in the western part of the country. And this is followed by refugees from about 50,000 of them. Then you have the one in green. This includes refugees from Rwanda, from Sudan, and we try to differentiate. We talk of Sudan, Khartoum. These are from the part of Africa. And then you also have a number of people from Ethiopia, Somalia, and Eritrea. Now you see there we have put stars on them. These ones are not mainly in refugee camps, what we call the urban refugees. They live in the city. So you find them mainly in Kampala and maybe other urban cities, but the majority are in Kampala. Now these ones here, they are free to, they do their own business. They depend on the United Nations for their keep. They pay their own rent. And the other thing which I should also let you know is that in Uganda, refugees are free to do business. They can go into farming or do commercial trade. They are also free to engage in any other activities that the local citizens are involved in without restrictions. They are also free to move from one part of the country to another. There is no restriction that you, a refugee, don't do this. So it is a kind of a free movement for them. And also I want to point out that Uganda hosts about a third of the refugee population in the world. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, now these are typical settlements of refugees. What you see on your left, you see a number of small huts. That is typical settlement of refugees in the country here, to your left there. And then, so you can find maybe around 60,000 or 25,000 refugees in such a city. Each one is given a piece of land measuring about 60 by 60 feet, where you are able to put a small hut, and then you have space where you can cultivate vegetables and a few crops to eat, which you can grow to eat. And then when you come, you see extreme right there, that those are their trading centers where they can do business. These are in the settlements. So you may find them selling electronics and other items, drinks, all these are done in this kind of settlements. And then at the bottom left, these are our colleagues. You can see Dennis OJ, he's there. And then have two other colleagues there. And then the young kids are children who got in the refugee camp. So these are typical settlements in the refugees. Yes, the next slide. Now let's go to our subject of the day. I have given you a background, a picture of how the refugees are in this country, but now look at cooking, energy for cooking. As you are aware, many of you from Africa, you know, almost 90% of the energy here required for cooking comes from biomass. We're talking of firewood and charcoal. This comes over 97%. In fact, I would not be afraid to say almost 100%. Now, this is what the refugees use. In fact, over 80% use firewood. They go and cut trees, and that's what they use for cooking. A few of them use charcoal. Charcoal is a bit expensive, so not many use it. It could even be less than 18%, but this I picked from a study by one of the NGOs. And then a few of them use farm waste. Farm waste don't provide you enough energy for cooking because they can burn very fast. So a few people use it. Let's go to the next slide. So the main source of energy here is real firewood. Now, as they use firewood, they also have the technologies for cooking, where they can burn this firewood. So we have the common one, which is known throughout many parts of Africa, the 3-stone open fire. And that, if you see to your left, down bottom to the left, those are the 3 stones. And even in the middle there, you see the 3 stones are basically, you have the stone and adjust it depending on the size of your pot, and use firewood open. So that means there is a lot of wastage of energy when you are cooking. The second method they use is some kind of clay which is built in form of stoves. You can see it on your extreme right. This we took it right in the refugee camp. So you have the clay molded, and therefore you can insert your firewood. This is outside cooking. Meanwhile, to your left top, you see also the clay stove where you use firewood, but this is inside the kitchen. When you cook inside, you save some energy, but the challenge is the smoke. And this smoke can get into your eyes. And of course, you are aware it has caused a lot of challenges, health challenges. So those, you have the open fire, the 3-stone fire, and then you have cooking based on where they use the clay, which is molded. We can call it a kind of improved stove, though not very efficient. And then, of course, you have metallic kind of improved stove. You have clay inside, and outside you have metallic seat is rounded. Now here you can use wood. If you see the picture in the middle, extreme right, there is red, that is the clay, and you can insert firewood there. That can save you some energy. And then you have the one which is based on charcoal. It's a charcoal stove. It is improved. The charcoal, these improved charcoal stoves are common mainly in the urban areas of Uganda, in Kampala, the other towns. They use this improved stove, but using charcoal. The advantage with charcoal is that at least you minimize the smoke. The smoke is not so much compared to when you use fire, but still at the end of the day, you cut down the trees. Next slide. I have a chart to the left. This is by a study done by some organization. According to them, they said the refugees in the camps, they moved to one of the camps in West Nile, part of the country, and they said about 55% of them use 3-stone firewood. And then about 16% use the clay stove based on firewood. And then a few use clay stove based on charcoal. But from our field observations, we think those numbers are a bit low for those who use firewood, the 3-stone. We think over 70% of the population in the refugees, the homestays, they use the 3-stone open firewood. And then another 20%, they use the clay stove based on firewood. Now you find in a homestead, there's always a mixture. The 3-stone open fire, and then you also have the clay based firewood cooking method. So those are the things they do in a home. And then of course, a few of them may use charcoal. These are people who are doing some kind of business, and therefore they can afford to buy the charcoal. Now, the improved stoves are usually connected to them by some humanitarian organizations, but their complaint is that they are not able to buy the charcoal. Please. Yeah, still based on the technologies they use for cooking, if you look at time spent for cooking, minimum you can spend maybe is about 1 hour. And that's the time you use maybe for boiling porridge. That's if you are taking breakfast in the morning. It's a common thing in the refugee camps. Now, I also want to let you know that the common food they are beans and dried beans, usually given by the humanitarian organizations. Now, to cook beans, you need quite huge sum. You need quite a lot of energy. So cooking beans can take you not less than 3 hours. So if you're using the 3-stone open fire method, then you are likely to use between 5 to 6 hours boiling the beans. So usually what happens is that they start in the morning. You can be doing some small work nearby, maybe washing clothes, and then maybe trying to dig or clean the compound while you set the fire going. And this fire keeps on burning out, so you have to keep on adding more firewood. So let's talk of an average of about 5 hours for cooking. And of course, this also depends on the number of people you have in a household. If you have quite a number of people, then you need more beans and therefore more time. Now, most times what people do is they boil the beans for lunch and maybe for supper. So you can spend about 5 to 6 hours, but you have also cooked for the evening dinner. So there's a lot of time being wasted on cooking using this 3-stone open fire technology. Next slide, please. Yes. Now, these are some of the challenges that you find. I mentioned from the beginning that the refugees depend mainly on the firewood for cooking. And therefore, they have been cutting the trees, and the trees are depleted. So to get firewood, you have to travel between 5, 6 to 10 kilometers. And this, you are walking on foot. You can see on the left top corner there, unfortunately, I cannot zoom it, but there is a lady within the refugee camps. It was a bit dusty because a vehicle just passed, but there's a lady carrying firewood on her head. She must have traveled quite a number of kilometers. Now she's coming back home with the firewood on her head. And then you see at the bottom here, these are young girls carrying bundles of firewood on their head. And that is the common trend you find in all these camps, not only with the refugees, even with the host communities. Women are the ones involved in collecting the firewood, because traditionally cooking is the responsibility of girls and women. So the women have to look for the fuel for cooking. 2, as I mentioned, they cover quite a number of kilometers to gather this firewood because there are no trees nearby. So you may find you spend about 3 hours walking to where you can get the firewood, another 3 hours coming back. So it is a common thing to find that people spend about 8 hours collecting firewood in a day. And this firewood, of course, you carry it on your head. And therefore you can see it is heavy, because if you carry a bundle of firewood which weighs, let's say 20 kilograms or 30 kilograms, by the time you walk 5 to 8 kilometers, you are really exhausted, and this impacts people's health. The other point that you should take note of is that because the firewood is scarce, it's now risky for the refugees to travel into the bushes to collect firewood. I'll expand on this in the next slide. Now, this is a typical scarcity firewood that you can observe in a home state. You see on the left, you have the small hut there, and then the type of logs they have there. Now, those kind of logs at least can cook for you food maybe for the next 2 days. But at the extreme right there, you see these are branches of tree. And if you see there's a hole nearby, which tells you that this person went to dig and got branches of trees and then collected those branches and brought home. And this is what he's going to use to cook food. But this kind of branches will not last even for 2 days. Next slide, please. Now let's do a bit of some estimation here. Typically, if you take a household of about 5 to 8 people, you need about roughly 6 to 7 kilograms of firewood in a day. But this, of course, I'm not talking about those branches I've just shown you. You need serious logs, about 6 or 8 kilograms a day to cook food. And here we're talking of boiling beans. Now, if you are to buy, I will tell you later why they need to buy the firewood, because it's not nearby. If you are to buy a bundle of firewood, usually firewood is sold in bundles, like what those small girls were carrying. A bundle may cost you roughly 5,000 Uganda shillings, which is roughly about maybe slightly more than $1, 1.2, let's say, US dollars. Maybe you're talking of about roughly 80 krona, something like that, Norwegian krona. Now, that can cook you food maybe for the next 3 days. So in a month, you need about $8 US. Roughly, that's the minimum you need to be able to get firewood that can cook you food for the household of about 5 to 8 people. But also remember that the refugees are quite many in a household. You may find about 15 people. 2, they do not have the money really to buy this firewood. That's another issue they have. On the other hand, if you say you want to use charcoal, 50 kilograms sack of charcoal may take you about $9 US. Let's say about 100 Norwegian krona. And that may last you for about 3 weeks, because beans require a lot of energy for cooking. And also it depends on the type of charcoal. If the charcoal is made out of firewood, which are not good, it can burn very fast. And then, so the quality of the charcoal matters, the number of people you have in your home matters, and the type of food you cook matters. If it's beans, which is a common thing, you have to spend a lot of money in a month. So generally, wood fuel is expensive for the refugees. Next slide, please. Now, we discussed briefly about the homestead. Now, let's look at the institutions. We visited 2 schools. One of them is a primary school. You can see the school behind there. There's a red roof and the structure is behind. And the photo inside their kitchen. The gentleman you see on the right, putting on a t-shirt, is the head of the cooks there. Now, this school has, I think, about 1,300 students. They have to prepare for them porridge in the morning, and then they prepare for them lunch. It's a primary school. Now, they use an improved cooking stove. They call it Eco Stove. It's applied to them by a South Korean organization. Now, the stove, the price is expensive. They talk of over $2,500, but this was supplied by a South Korean organization. So it's expensive. Now, the way this stove works is that they don't use charcoal, they use briquettes. Of course, the briquettes also come from charcoal residue mixed with that stuff. They don't produce the briquettes themselves. The briquettes are supplied by the same organization from Kala. This stove is connected to a battery which is charged with solar PV. So when the fire is reducing, you can put it on, you switch it on, and then there is a fan inside the stove. So that fan is driven by the electricity, and therefore it kind of increases the fuels this burning fire, such that it is burning and giving you enough energy. If you are kind of done with your cooking, then you switch it on. You switch it off. So that's how they continue. But the advantage is that it is clean because there's no smoke in the kitchen. But the challenge is that their system is sustainable if these organizations supporting them withdraw. That's what we have realized. For now, they're comfortable with it. The head cook there is very happy with everything. But the fear is that if the organization withdraws, not sustains system. You can go to the next slide. Now, this is the second school in the same camp, within the same camp. It has over 1,200 students, half refugees, half the local citizens. If you see at the extreme, the photo at the top there, you see our colleagues there standing near their stove. It is built out of bricks, burned bricks. They use firewood. And the person in the middle there is the head teacher of the school. And to the extreme right is official from office of the Prime Minister Refugee Desk, who had to take us around. Now, the teacher told us that they spend up $120 to buy firewood per week. But unfortunately, even if you have the money, firewood is not available, it's scarce. So by the time we reach there, what is you see extreme right is the only firewood left. So he said he had closed the school at the end of the term, 2 weeks before the end of the term. So those are the challenges they face. And the bottom there, you see, that is the school. Next slide, please. Now, we have been about the challenges, but also the local newspapers have been highlighting the challenges that not refugees, but also the citizens have faced. So you see at the bottom here is the local newspaper saying schools demand for firewood killing the environment. And that's the reality. The schools use huge, they need quite several tons of firewood to sustain them in a school semester, because they have to cook 3 meals, and most times they cook beans. So you need several tons of firewood in a semester. Now, I mentioned to you that the refugees have challenges in accessing firewood because there's now a source of conflict between the refugees and the host communities on accessing firewood. So in most cases, the refugees are not allowed to access firewood. Cases of violence have been reported against the refugees because now there's scarcity of firewood, even rape. These have been reported to police. So what happens is that the local communities say they are the ones who have the right to collect the firewood, and the refugees must buy from them. Now, because the refugees may not have the money to buy, so they have to trade their food. So you see on the upper side there, the picture up there basically is a market in the refugee camp, and they're actually selling the food items. You can trade the food items with the firewood, or you sell, you get money and use part of that money to get firewood. And then, of course, the National Forest Authority has reported that generally in Uganda, 92,000 hectares of trees are being depleted every year. And this is a huge challenge to the country. Next slide, please. We had one of our colleagues who has expertise in forestry and GIS mapping. So while we were in the camp, he did a quick kind of investigation and took maps in the area. And then he was able to look at it. What happened? How was the landscape like before the refugees came in 2013? And how is it like after the refugees came in the period 2019? So what you see up there, it tells you the vegetation in the land, how the land looks like before the refugees were there. In 2019, now when the refugees were there, they had stayed for there, I think for about a period of about 5 years. Is the second map down. So if you see carefully to your left, you see the green, then you see a place which is kind of bare now. It's cleared towards the left there. The vegetation is extreme right. If you compare the two maps, you'll see that there's a stretch in somewhere towards your left is now bare. So if you come to the table, there's something which has been highlighted in red. It tells you the tree cover, how it has reduced, what was in 2013 and how it has reduced in 2019. You see a decrease of more than 14% in a period of about 5 to 6 years. And the reason for this is the trees were cut either for buildings, houses, but mainly for firewood. That's what is happening. These were just preliminary studies. And then you can see at the bottom there, again, a newspaper highlighting German officials worry as refugees strip the land bare. I think millions of trees have disappeared and they have not been replaced. So that is the impact of the settlement, and especially the challenges to do with fuel for cooking. Let's go to the next slide. I think I need to move a bit faster. Time is running. Way forward. Humanitarian organizations have never prioritized energy for cooking in their emergency plans. What they look at is, how do we settle this people? How do we give them food? How do we give them tents? You give them food, but you don't give them the energy for preparing the food. So there's a suggestion that the humanitarian organizations now should also put energy for cooking in their intervention plans. The few humanitarian organizations that we have met in the camps say they are looking for alternative sources of energy, but nobody is clearly able to tell you what are these alternative sources of energy. It's like everybody does not know what to do next. You see, they supply stoves, but the improved stoves still depend on the same firewood, the same charcoal. There's also a suggestion that they need to supply the refugees with fast-growing trees like eucalyptus, which can mature maybe in 2 to 3 years, and then therefore they can be able to cut for firewood. But this seems to be taking long to be implemented. Now, the picture on the left you see up there, these are common things that you see on the roads in Uganda. People supplying firewood to urban centers. I mean, charcoal. You see those kind of trucks, they're very common. At the bottom, you see those are wood logs which have been cut, ready for sale. So everybody is talking of alternative sources of energy, but it has remained a song for the last few years, as far as I can remember. Let's go to the next slide. Now, we have been involved in studies to do small-scale solar thermal energy storages, and the aim was to come up with solutions for cooking. Basically, the aim is to store the heat during the day, solar energy, you store it, and then maybe during the evening, you should be able to cook. We have done this work for quite a number of years with support from NORAD over the years. We think this research can be a long-term sustainable solution to the crisis that many of the developing countries are facing. The research has shown promising results. What you see here is the top picture. You see one, you see rice being boiled, but the storage, which is like a kind of insulated, you see some kind of insulation there, that is a heat storage. And then you have a valve, which is connected through pipes, which are insulated to a cooker. So if you have enough heat stored using oil, we've used sunflower oil, we have also used the Shell Tamiya B to store the heat. You should be able to switch on your, once you have stored enough energy, you should be able to run it and start cooking. This particular design has been able to boil rice, but it has some few challenges, so we're trying to work on it. The bottom ones you see, those are new designs that we are engaging on now. And we think if we address the challenges in the previous studies, we should come up with results which are suitable for use. This work, which is ongoing right now, we have funding from the EU Erasmus, on a project called University Network on Energy. This is basically going to support training in energy. We'll develop PhD curriculums. And of course, it also supports lab facilities. We try to establish facilities in the lab to help the students do good research. We also have support from NORAD through NORAD, what we call Energy Tech Network, which is for the next 6 years. It will support our laboratory facilities, PhD and NC training. Of course, we are a huge network. I will show you in the next few slides. And at Makerere, we plan to do some testing in the refugee camps. My colleague, I will request OJ or Mambo along the way, they can add more on this, or my colleague Dennis. Next slide, please. Yeah, we want to acknowledge support from the EU Erasmus project for the UNET project. NORAD, they have supported us through this NORHED 2, but also NORAD supported us through previous research grants through NUFO, NOMA, ENP, all directed towards building capacity in renewable energy. And then, of course, we also acknowledge the rich collaboration we have had with NTNU Trondheim, Makerere University, Addis Ababa University, University of Dar es Salaam, Eduardo Mondlane University, and all these partners, the Norwegian Embassy in Kampala, all of them have supported us. Next slide. Yeah, Tushen Tak.